Hi everyone, my name's Ilona Millar and I'm a Special Counsel at Baker McKenzie in the Sydney Environmental Markets Group. Baker and McKenzie, for those of you who don't know us, are a global law firm with a leading climate change practice that has been running for almost 19 years now. We have been closely involved in the development of carbon markets and emissions trading schemes globally, and today I'm very pleased to be talking to you about some of the key issues around carbon accounts and risk management. One of the most important things when looking at corporate participation in carbon pricing schemes is understanding the legal and regulatory frameworks that apply to the operation of those schemes, and in particular to the collection of emissions data and the reporting of that data to regulators. In our experience, one of the key areas for and risks in respect of compliance with carbon pricing schemes is that the data that underpins those schemes is either inaccurate or incomplete. So we feel that it's very important for companies to put in place very strong data collection and data management systems to ensure that they're reporting to regulators on their emissions and energy use and production is accurately captured. One of the greatest risks with carbon emission pricing schemes and carbon accounting is getting the incorrect data or inaccurate data, because this obviously feeds into those compliance obligations. It's important when looking at the regulatory frameworks that govern carbon accounting for companies to understand, firstly, the level at which the reporting is taking place. Is it at a facility level, or does it aggregate up to the corporate group? What is it that needs to be captured and reported on? This includes understanding the sectors that are covered by a reporting scheme, and also the thresholds for reporting, as well as the gases and data that needs to be collected. We recommend, when developing and designing carbon accounting management systems, that companies put in place strong processes and procedures for the capture of data, the appointment of representatives who will take responsibility for engagement with regulators and submission of information to the regulators, and also making sure that senior executives in the company, who are often the ones responsible ultimately for submitting reports, are aware of their obligations and the timeframes involved. We also think it's really important for companies to develop strong and good working relationships with the regulators. By having an ongoing dialogue with the regulators, you can then work closely to identify some of the challenges in the technical reporting. Some industries and sectors have quite specific data collection methodologies and reporting methodologies that often need to be worked through and explained to regulators. So having a good working relationship with regulators can make it much easier to explain any potential discrepancies with reports, and also to ensure that that if there are potentially compliance issues down the line, you have an open and responsive way of engaging with the regulator. I think the key challenges for carbon risk management and emissions accounting come down to questions of understanding the legal and regulatory frameworks that apply to the company. In this respect, if companies are unclear about their legal obligations, this can create problems in terms of their meeting their compliance obligations. One really good example of this is something that we have seen here in Australia, where you have a number of companies that are new entrants to the renewable energy market, and as part of that they're fully across all of their obligations from an energy market perspective in terms of the capturing of information and compliance with regulatory frameworks. But because renewable energy of itself doesn't have significant greenhouse gas emissions, there have been instances where companies have failed to register and report under our greenhouse and energy reporting legislation, because that legislation not only covers emissions but also captures energy production and energy consumption. So by failing to recognise in the first instance that the legislation also covered their energy production, these companies were potentially at risk of failing to accurately register and report under that legislation on the basis that they didn't fully appreciate their obligation to do so. Another key challenge and risk in respect of emissions reporting is in respect of the accuracy and robustness of data collection and information. In this respect, it's really important that companies understand the technical detail of the material that needs to be collected. And in this respect, in many cases, the regulatory frameworks will have very, very clear guidance about the methods that need to be applied for accounting and data collection, and making sure that companies understand that and clearly specify the methods that are going to be applied for each source of emissions and collect that data across all of their facilities will mean that the data collection can be accurate and robust. A key risk is failure to complete the reporting processes in a timely manner. Most legislative schemes will specify dates for reporting, and failure to report by those due dates can then lead to penalties for non-compliance. So in summary, I think the main things to keep in mind when looking at the development of risk management frameworks for carbon accounting really come down to a couple of key points. Firstly, understand the legal and regulatory frameworks in which you're operating in, which may be across a number of jurisdictions, and those obligations may be found in a number of different pieces of legislation. Secondly, it's important to understand and delineate amongst the obligations of different corporate entities, particularly if you've got a broader corporate group, to understand what needs to be done at the facility level and what needs to be done at the corporate level. It's important to make sure you've got robust data management systems in place to collect data and to streamline and facilitate your reporting. And then be aware of the timeframes for reporting and be aware of your compliance obligations. And then the final point is know your regulators and try and develop a good working relationship with them.